United Nations Development Fund, UNDP, works to eradicate poverty and reduce inequalities through the sustainable development of nations in more than 170 countries and territories. Nigeria now has a new resident representative, Elsie G Attafuah, who is accountable for harnessing and directing the full potential of UNDP's capabilities and associated partnerships in support of national development goals and strategies in Nigeria. She joins us now from our Abuja studio. Good morning and welcome to the morning show, Ms. Attafuah, and shall I say welcome to Nigeria, even though you've been here for a few months already, but you're most welcome.
Well, thank you very much for the very warm welcome, and thanks to Arise for hosting me. It's my first engagement with the media formally, so really kudos to you and the management for hosting me this morning.
Excellent. So most countries, Nigeria included, are behind with attaining the Sustainable Development Goals, with 6 years left to the deadline. Do you think that current global conditions are conducive to the attainment of the lofty ambitions of Agenda 2030?
Well, first of all, before I get started with the conversation, let me say a very big thank you to the government of Nigeria for really approving me to be here to support this very wonderful country, and to all the public for the wonderful Niger welcome, and especially to the viewers also today who are just watching me. Now back to your question around the conditions of the world today and whether we can achieve the 2030 agenda. Let me try to give a bit of context, because context matters for the conversation this morning. What is the Sustainable Development Goals? What are they? And it is indeed their most ambitious blueprint that we have for peace and prosperity for people and planet on Earth, which has been approved by over 190 countries, of which our wonderful country, Nigeria, is part of. And so where is the world today? Where is the world today? The world is at a juncture, a critical juncture, where we do have countries, including ours, battling multiple crises, from COVID to climate to war, inequalities, high prices, and many more. So you see this sort of stacked picture, but also on the other hand, we have a world of opportunities where we have technology, we have a very youthful continent and the world today, we have development financing, so we have great opportunities that we can leverage. So it's this sort of mixed picture that we do have. Now, let me try to unpack it and give a bit of meat on the bone, because it's very important. Not too long ago, our own Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, launched a report on the Sustainable Development Goals at midterm. At midterm, what did we find? At midterm, the report really showed that we had made progress on HIV, child mortality, gender equality, and many more. But also at midterm, the results are so mixed. We still see that many countries are lacking in a number of things. The Sustainable Development Goals at present, only 12% of the 140 targets are on track. 50% of those are still moderately on track, and about 30% are not on track at all. Even by 2030, as I speak today, we will still have 660 million people without electricity. Over 600 million people will be still facing poverty, and 575 million people facing hunger. It will take about 286 years for us to bridge certain gender gaps. So this is the world today. But I think what is very important is for us to be able to be optimistic. In other words, that we should be able to look into the future, look at the glass half full rather than half empty, and really galvanize the support that we need globally. And most recently, as UNDP, we launched our Human Development Report, and which is saying that we must be able to reimagine cooperation in a world that is very polarized, empowering people to take destiny into their own hands, ensuring that we reform the international financial architecture and push back on polarization. So all I can say is that it is not only that the picture is stacked, but importantly for us to be able to move together in a very structured way to address the challenge that we are faced today.
Okay, but let me ask you, how can Nigeria navigate the challenges of global interdependence, particularly in the light of its own, well, a bit peculiar socioeconomic and political landscape?
Well, I mean, first of all, let me start with how can Nigeria, and I think by extension the world today, how can we get out of this situation that we are in with a mixed picture of the Sustainable Development Goals? I think the first one is what Nigeria is already aligned to in terms of the Secretary General's agenda of the United Nations. And basically what the Secretary General is calling for is a rescue plan, in that governments, heads of states and governments must be able to put in ambitious plans to rescue the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think Nigeria is already on that pathway in terms of its own response to the SDGs. What does it mean to rescue the SDGs? It means we have to do a number of things. The Secretary General calls for governments to put together what we call, integrated policies and programming. In other words, you cannot say do agriculture alone without looking at the links between agriculture and, for example, trade, the link between agriculture and, for example, energy. And so you need to foster that intercollaboration across sectors, across programs in the country. But also, importantly, to address issues around strengthening institutional capacity to be able to address the challenge that we are faced both at the national level and also at the sub-national level. And we already see that Nigeria is already doing some of these things. So again, institutional capacity building is one of the things that we are called for to do, and Nigeria is doing that. The other thing that is called for to do is that to reform even the global architecture. Things need to be different, the way we are doing things, and Nigeria is at the forefront of conversations now around what we can collectively do. And recently, the Minister of Finance joined us, which is this leadership role that Nigeria is leading, to say, what do we need to do to make sure that the reforms are there to push the development agenda forward. So Nigeria is already on that pathway. And I should say that the Renewed Hope agenda, which His Excellency the President has put forward, is one of those that we should be able to run galvanize support using those instruments that has been proposed to be able to move that agenda forward. And I think we can already see some of those in terms of devolution of power, where if you take, for example, the new Electricity Act, which is devolving power to the state, is one of those instruments that will allow us then to be able to bridge a gap when it comes to energy access and energy transition. We have technology which is on our side here, very youthful population here, and who are really sparking the digital revolution here in Nigeria. And I should say, we're just coming out of a meeting this week that Honorable Bosun is putting together on artificial intelligence. What is the role of artificial intelligence in pushing the future of development? And Nigeria is leading the way. And I don't think there is any African country yet in that space pushing the conversation around AI and the way we can link AI, for example, to health, to education, to skilling, and many, many more. So I think the pathways are there, and we can already see that. Now, what does it mean for all of us? It means collective action, not only on the government side. It means collective action on also the role of the private sector in terms of engendering finance, for example, an investment that will support the development course here. It means that non-state actors need to be much more engaged, including the media, yourselves and us, to be able to put our acts together and really make sure that we are leveraging our comparative advantages, competencies, complementarities. It will mean, for example, we need to empower the people on the ground, to put their destiny into their hands by giving them what it takes for them to leapfrog development. And so I think the right indicators are there. And although that we attained low middle income status in 2014, there's still a lot more to do. And I think I would want to look at the glass half full by saying that I think the parameters are right. We can already see that different actors in the country are rallying around the vision of the government. For example, we do also see, for example, the Foreign Ministry has the 4D model on development, on democracy, on diaspora, and many more. And of course, Honorable Tuga and ourselves and other partners will also moving those agendas forward. So I think there's a lot more to our advantage that we can leverage, including diversifying the economy to look at other areas that can support the growth of this country, but in an inclusive way.
Right. Thank you. And welcome once again. And I'm sure, I hope you've gone through the potpourri of our very good food in Nigeria. I'm sure you probably had your fair share of our jollof rice and our local meals and everything, and our suya and all of that. I'm sure you had your bit of all of that. So welcome home. Nigeria is home to everybody.
I'm enjoying.
What are
Nigeria is home. I'm from next door Ghana. It's home. It's home, and I've eaten the amala soft. I was in Lagos the other day. I tried amala. I'm eating. Let's not bring the jollof fight here, my brother.
No. We just need
I have to be on the side of Nigeria, though.
We just need to settle it in the interest of peace, regional peace. Which is the best jollof rice, Nigeria or Ghana jollof rice you've had? Okay, you give a diplomatic answer.
Now I have to change hearts. I have to be diplomatically correct here, and so Niger wins the day.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Confirm. So, UNDP has been working to support Nigerian government to attain its development agenda. In the next 4 years, what are UNDP's top priority areas?
So thank you very much for that question. It's a very passionate one, and I could say that UNDP has fire in the belly to push the development agenda of Nigeria forward. So we are here, and our priority is really not our priority as UN. Our priority is to support the government's development agenda, and therefore, as the largest development agency in the United Nations family, we bring our full assets, including a partnership with our sister agencies, the United Nations family, under the resident coordinator, to be able to support the government of Nigeria. I think there are 3 directions of change, if I may call it so, that we are very, we will rally our efforts around as sort of the principle first. First of all, we want to push structural transformation. In other words, we've been doing development over and over the same way, and we are not seeing difference match. And therefore, for us, it's why do things not work? We don't have to focus on the symptoms, but on the causes. And therefore, our priority is to really push that structural transformation agenda forward. And that's what we'll be doing in terms of supporting the government's development agenda. But also importantly, the whole notion around leaving no one behind. We always talk about it as if it's a cliche. Leaving no one behind means what? Where are they? So we need to focus on the priority areas, including a youthful population in this country, women, persons with disabilities, and therefore a strong focus on leaving no one behind becomes a priority for us. But also importantly, in terms of the direction of change, is to focus on the issue around resilience. And especially in a time that we are battling multiple crises, what does it mean to build resilience to crises and shocks, making sure that we have economic resilience, agricultural resilience, and many more. And so these are the sort of the 3 directions of change that we are preoccupied with. But what does it mean translating that practically on the ground? We can't do everything, but we want to be able to give energy and push to things that matter and do development unusual. What does it mean? There are about 3 areas or 4 that we are concerned about, and of course we are working with government on. And on the thematics, we are very much interested in the area of energy. Energy, it's you cannot push a development agenda if there is no energy. There could be no trade that is sustainable when there is no energy. Energy is an integrator linked to health, linked to education, linked to trade, and many more. And therefore, with the new vision the country has through the Electricity Act, we will rally our energies around that, including supporting states to make sure it happens through their legal and regulatory instruments, but also crowding in financing and investments to make it happen. And so that is a priority area for us. We certainly would be looking into the area of climate and climate resilience. I think one of the most compelling development challenges of all times is on climate change. And for us, building climate resilience, including the links between climate and security, becomes very important. And so that's one of the sort of broad cluster of work that we are interested in. We are also interested in the area of trade and investment. You know, it's interesting. Africa is 1.4 billion people, 1.4 billion. We only trade amongst ourselves only 16%. In other words, I'm wearing an adire today. People have been asking me, can we have some in Uganda and other spaces? How do we make sure that we are able to trade amongst African countries a lot more and retain wealth in the continent, build regional value chains that matter? And therefore, we are very much concerned and will be supporting the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, but also more broadly trade and investment, because there's no country that has developed without trading amongst its neighbors. So trade is a very important component of our work. The third cluster, which is of interest to us, and UNDP will be again supporting with development partners, with our sister agencies in partnership, with our resident coordinator, is the question around governance. And when we talk governance, people always think that governance is elections. No, governance go beyond that, and governance of things. And we are very interested in governance from different points of view, particularly issue around devolution of power, which we're beginning to see now with the state moving to Electricity Act, conversation around state policing. What does it it actually mean in terms of public accountability issues and ensuring that systems and processes and structures are right to be able to advance conversations around government. So these are perhaps some of the broad thematics in addition to the work that we are doing, particularly on stabilization in Northeast and in Northwest. But they are enablers for development that we will need to collectively focus on. And that is very exciting for us in many different ways. One of them is in the area of digitalization. I mean, digitalization and innovation by extension. It is one of those spaces that we need to push and push and push. Why? Because the future of development has gone digital. The future of development is about how we innovate and how we leverage those. And so we are particularly doing some exciting work, and we'll continue to do that, establishing innovation spaces in public universities, in TVET spaces, and many, many more. And we're causing a revolution, if you may call it so, in that space. We also want to digitalize many things, whether digitalizing financing instruments, which we are working with the Revenue Authority on it. We are talking to the, different actors and to ensure that we can make government services go and therefore you don't have to go paperwork. You have to be able to sit in a space, whether in your post office, another space, and be able to get services for that. So I think digitalization is going to be massive for us. But importantly, how do we finance development? Because development, we need quite a lot to be able to finance the development agenda of Nigeria. And therefore, on the development finances space, which is an enabler for development, we are not only we are going to be looking at innovative finance sources, instruments, and mechanisms. We are looking at things that we have never done before in the area of finance, but also how do we leverage domestic financing, including rationalizing the use of existing resources to be able to push Nigeria's development forward. So in all these things, I think, again, there are cross-cutting things that we'll be looking at: youth, gender, women's empowerment, and I talked about leaving no one behind. So I think it is going to be priority for us, but our priority is not UNDP's priority. Our priority is the government's priority. So where the government tells us to go, we would go. And we would be increasing our partnerships across board with different actors, including yourselves as the media, because we need to push advocacy and certain behavioral changes that is better to do when we act and we partner with agencies like yours. Yeah. We'll be looking at partnering with the creatives, non-traditional partners, of course, strengthening our relationship with government, our development partners, and of course, with the United Nations family to deliver as one, because again, we have a number of agencies here that are doing great work, and we're pulling our assets together to support the people of Nigeria.
Excellent. I love you. You speak with so much passion, and we can see the clear direction you set for yourself, having assumed office. But one of the first things you did was the launch of the Human Development Report earlier on in March by the UNDP, and you had spoken about the outcome from that report. Can you speak a little bit about that report that you launched earlier, last month actually, March?
Well, thank you. So UNDP has been issuing this authoritative reports in the last couple of years, and this year we did launch the one globally, but also here in Nigeria, and on the theme reimagining cooperation in a very polarized world, and how we can break the gridlock. And so basically, what we are seeing in that the Human Development Report is that because of the interlinked crisis that we saw, the crisis of COVID, the crisis of climate, the crisis of war, and many, human development began to retrogress, which means that when we look at the Human Development Index, we are looking at issues around access to education, we are looking at the social sectors, and the Human Development Report Index goes beyond income. It goes beyond income to look at a number of things. So what we are seeing is that while some countries have, rebounded, they've bounced back, especially the developed countries, a lot of the developing countries are not doing well. And so we are seeing that inequality is increasing. increasing. We are seeing that poverty is increasing, particularly for developing countries. And Nigeria has made some progress indeed, but still there is a lot more to be done. And so what the thrust of the report is saying that in the midst of everything else that we are seeing, it is a collective. We are so interdependent now. When somebody sneezes, everybody catches a cold. We need to work together. And working together means that we must push back on polarization. In other words, what divides us, what brings us together is much stronger than what divides us. And therefore, when we are seeing all this polarization, we must push back. And we must use international cooperation, national cooperation to push back on polarization. The other thing that is talking about, which is very pertinent to us here in Nigeria, it talks about the fact about agency. Agency means that we must be able to allow people to influence their own lives and destiny. We must be able to empower them through education, through skilling, through providing them with services that allows them to be able to leapfrog. And finally, to push on the reforms on the international financial institution. I think that even for you, the media, take interest in that conversation, okay? We have rating agencies that rate African countries in a way that we borrow at higher cost. That needs to be reformed. So it's a number of reforms, including multilateral development banks that need to be able to give much more financing to developing countries. The need for us to be able to redirect special drawing rights. These are all things that are being discussed, and I think that it's quite important for us to understand what it all means for a country like Nigeria, which sits at a very important space in the continent's development agenda, because if Nigeria succeeds, quite frankly, we all succeed in the region. And so the report really is one that shows where countries are. I would encourage all of you to be able to connect to that report online. It's on our UNDP website, and also we're happy to share with our eyes, to share it on your platform so people can digest the report a bit more.
Well, finally, before we go, there's a timeline to this, 2030, Agenda 2030. We had Millennium Development Goals. Now we have these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are more or less an extension of the MDGs. But do you think that goal of 2030 as the timeline, do you think it's achievable, particularly in developing countries, given the lessons we learned from the MDGs?
Yes, so I think, again, we can make some great progress together. And again, I think later this year, our Secretary General is calling for the Summit of the Future. Our own Deputy Secretary General, who comes from Nigeria, is also pushing very hard. I think we can make some fantastic progress if we put our acts together. And again, like I said, for a country like Nigeria, I think we have all it takes. We have all it takes to be able to at least get closer to the 2030 agenda, if not for everything. So I think we can move that agenda forward. Can we be able to? We have to be ambitious. And like I said earlier on, the rescue plan, we must rescue it. And I think that if we are able, and now we don't have 7 years, actually we now have 6 years now, if we're able to do the needful, including areas where we need to push structural transformation, in areas where we need to be able to empower people to do what it takes, in areas where we can bring efficiency and effectiveness the way we do governance. These are all areas that we could look. Now, I think for a country that is of a federal nature here, we can also work particularly with the states, with the governors, to say what is it that we want to see on a development pathway. Work with them in the next 6 years to say, let's outline the priorities and which priorities have multiple effect on others, and work with those states under the leadership, of course, of the president to move those conversations forward. So I am very optimistic. I think we have seen in many countries that it takes 1 year to turn things around. So we still have 6 years ahead of us, and we should be able to push the agenda forward.
Okay, I remember that. Thank you very much, Ambassador Attafuah, for your optimism. Thank you very much indeed.